Hi, guys. Welcome to the chat. Before I do anything, say anything, let me make sure things are working because YouTube was acting strange today. So let me make sure Instagram is working, my volume is working. If you guys can't hear me, please let me know if there's anything wrong on your end. Let me type a message to Instagram really quickly. If you have questions or comments. Okay, just sending a message to Instagram. Thank you so much, Cam. Thank you for that confirmation. Hopefully things work out. I was like troubleshooting. I'm like, what is happening? Not today. Oh, it's been one of those weeks, let me tell you. So let me just start by introducing the topic. And then, as I always do, I'm going to go ahead and get into welcoming you and talking about things and teasing this topic apart. So, this topic is pretty heavy. And the reason why is because the concept, the explanation, and the exploration of evil is complex. And so I'm going to try to tease this apart from a spiritual, psychological, theological, and scientific perspective for you tonight. I'm hoping to wrap up around 7:25, 7:30-ish. I'm going to hold myself to that. But let me get into this topic of being born evil. A couple weeks ago, I did a live chat. You guys were very, very, very active in that video. That video actually ended up, if you will, going viral within 2 hours span of time. It had like 25,000 views. And that is because the topic of evil is pretty popular on YouTube. If you have a social media radar for we social media psychologists, psychotherapists, creators, we have tools, and the tools show us the numbers and the data. And when I type into some of the tools that I use to kind of look at the statistics of YouTube, when I type in the topic of evil, it is one of the biggest topics on YouTube. You can type it into the search engine and you will see videos galore, from personal experiences of evil to spiritual experiences of evil to professional experiences of evil to the psychology of the term evil. There's actually videos on YouTube where, you may find some professionals trying to decipher between the personal and professional view of the term evil. You will definitely see my videos up there as well because it's a popular topic. So, this topic is something because not only is it popular on YouTube, but it's also popular among people who are trying to understand just their family relationships, their romantic relationships, their years and years of generational trauma. One of the reasons why, is, it's hard to understand behavior that just doesn't add up. And when the behavior doesn't seem to make sense from the view of psychology, when it doesn't seem to make sense from the view of philosophy, or even sometimes the view of religion, we then turn down this road of there has to be something bigger and more in depth than just what these fields are telling us about this topic. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm bringing this topic back to the channel. The other reason is because after my last topic on the psychology of evil, I was asked, can you be born evil? Is there anything that can help us determine if a person is born with evil genes, with some kind of mentality that can then be turned evil over time? Can you actually have a genetic makeup of being evil? And some of the research I'm going to mention tonight will answer that question for you. I'm not going to give you the answer right now. I do want to tease this apart for you before we do that. Let me just say that there is some research in psychology now, and I'm going to make sure that I post this in the description box for you, so that you can look at it yourself. You can click on it, look at it yourself. There is some research in the field of psychology that says that there are some genes and there is some biology that can explain the mentality or the neurology behind the mentality of people who engage in evil acts and behaviors. And so we're going to get into that just a little bit in just a little bit here. I also want to highlight some, psychological research that was important back in the 70s that can help us understand evil behavior and how a person can maybe not be born evil per se, but be born with the neurological foundation needed to actually perform acts and behaviors that would be unfathomable to most of us, right? There are some human beings, you just look at them and you just say, how's that possible? How do you do that emotionally? How do you do that psychologically? How do you do that without a conscience? Why are you this way? What makes you different? So I'm going to tease that apart as well. Let me also add in here before I go to the chat box as well that, there's also some studies going on in philosophy, in theology, that highlights that there may actually be a pattern of behavior in people who have a propensity towards becoming evil. So let's say, for example, those individuals who are kind of obsessed with crime, they are kind of obsessed with and fantasize over things that we would consider evil, excuse me, such as murder. And if we're talking about psychopaths, let's bring up the names Jeffrey Dahmer and Dennis Nilsen. Those are two individuals who did some unfathomable things. And when interviewed about the unfathomable things that they had done, the number one reason that they gave, and this is probably something you guys already know, but I like to make sure that you really know the facts. The number one thing that they claimed, and I'm going to give you a little bit of details on some of the things that they did if you're not familiar with it. But one of the things that they claimed is that they were number one, lonely after murder, strategizing, I should say that first, strategizing, murdering, and dismembering parts of bodies and living with either the dead bodies, which was Dennis Nilsen, or the dismembered body parts, which was Jeffrey Dahmer. They actually spent some time with dead bodies that they had actually sat up in chairs. They had actually laid their corpse out, and they would have conversations with these individuals. They would, sit around them and do normal things like watch TV and eat and things like that. Jeffrey Dahmer was the one who dismembered parts of the bodies of his victims and spent as much time with them as he could before, the body went through its decaying process. So we're talking about really, really evil, dark minds when you're talking about Dennis Nilsen and Jeffrey Dahmer. So I'm using them as examples to say that these individuals, the number one reason they gave for performing these evil acts was loneliness. And we know in the clarity of mind that we have as those of us who are observing these two very sick individuals, we know in the clarity of our mind that this behavior is completely 100% unfathomable. There is no way that a normal, quote unquote, normal human being could do these things and say, I did them because I was lonely. I didn't grow up with friends. I was bullied. This was Jeffrey Dahmer. I didn't have an interest in people, but I still had this loneliness. And so I decided to do these things so that I could at least have somebody there in the same room with me. Okay. So this is an example of just the bottom of evil. Okay. For those of you who are also not aware, there's a research study that was done by social psychologist Philip Zimbardo And he had done this study in 1971. It's called the Stanford Prison Experience. And for those of you who aren't aware, I'll explain it a little bit more in a little bit here. But let me just say that the people that he recruited were very healthy, mentally, emotionally, physically healthy individuals. They were actually college students, and 70 people responded to his call, quote unquote, call for research participants, and he ended up choosing 24 adults that he used in his research study, and the bottom pit of human evil was seen in that experiment. So I'm going to talk about that as well tonight. I also want to talk about the definitions of evil. Let me just say as well here, before I jump into the chat box and see what you guys are saying, let me also just say that if you look up evil on Google, okay, which some of you may have already done it, but if you look it up, I can guarantee you're not going to find what you're looking for. You're not going to find any kind of spiritual explanations of evil. You're not going to find anybody saying that you can be born evil. You're actually going to find three common concepts. The first concept is the concept of evil being a socially constructed concept, that people in society experience atrocities and they label it evil because it's easier and it makes sense and it feeds the psychology of man. Okay, that's one concept that you're going to get. The other concept is that the term evil is a culturally constructed concept, meaning that depending on whether you're religious or philosophical or atheistic or agnostic, or you're African American, Native American, Indian, Portuguese, whatever, the cultural identification of the term evil says that your culture determines your belief in the term. I don't know if I agree with that 100%. I also don't agree that it's 100% socially constructed. The last theory that you're going to see is the psychological theory of evil, which is that there's only two forms of evil, and that's the psychopath and the dark empath. That's psychology's concept of evil, psychopathy. And if you look up born evil or evil genes or evil biology, guess what you're going to find? You're going to find the term psychopathy. And that's the only thing that psychology can give us. That psychopaths and dark empaths are those individuals I always talk about on the channel. They have the personality traits of psychopathy, so they're psychopaths. They have the personality trait of narcissism, and they also have the personality trait of Machiavellianism, meaning that they get stimulation from doing things like, wrecking your marriage or having an affair with your best friend, or, taking the job opportunity you work so hard for. They get some kind of pleasure from that. So psychology says the dark empath and the psychopath is the only explanation of evil that they can find. Philip Zimbardo said, you know what? I don't know if I agree with that. Let me find a different theory of evil here and let me try to explore it. So he wrote a book, The Psychology of Evil. You may want to check that out if you're looking for more of a psychological explanation of evil. Let me go to the chat box, see what you guys are saying. We're going to talk about the Stanford prison experiment just a little bit. I want to give you some research, and then the part that you all are probably waiting for, I want to give you, which is, what does this look like in human form? What does evil look like in human form? And can I find it in my family? And if so, what do I need to be looking for? So we're going to get to that. Okay, guys, let me go to the very top of the chat here. The Retro Woman 80, hello and welcome to the live chat. Glad to see you today. Yes. Thank you for that. I hope you're having a good evening. I hope all of you also had a decent 4th of July. Once you pass the age of 35, like I have, I don't know. Holidays don't mean the same to me, guys. I'm sorry. They just don't. I always feel like, okay, Christmas, yes, I'll go a little further with that one. Thanksgiving, I'll go a little further with that one. But all the other holidays, including my birthday, forget it. I'd rather sleep, garden, something, watch a movie on the couch with popcorn. Cam, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Glad to see you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you were able to come this week too. I'm glad I was able to do a live this week. Yesterday, I'm like, should I have done a live on a weekend of a holiday? I don't know. So glad to see all of you. Betsy, hello, welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. I also see Mrs. Ed, hello and welcome. Glad to have you tonight. Elizabeth Wildley, glad to see you as well. I'm looking for comments also. Jessica J, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. I hope you're doing well. I did get your email. I saw it and then I'm like, okay, I'm not going to read this because I'm on my vacation. This was yesterday. And I'm like, I don't want to get upset. Because sometimes when you guys send me things, I'm like, oh God, this is happening, So, but Jessica J, I saw your email. I'm certainly going to get to you. That's for sure. Tammy Nicely, hello, welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Fifi LaFleur, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Hello and welcome. I'm glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Catherine Gruber, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. Says, my toxic mom emailed my husband a few days ago saying how she's concerned I'm neglecting our kids. It was paragraphs long. Well, I don't know the dynamic there and I don't have the details of that either, so I can't really comment, but let me say it feels evil, right? It feels evil when someone sends you number one paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. Sometimes that's the only way people know how to communicate. I get that. Sometimes, that's the only way to really get to the bottom of an issue too, is to just kind of hash it out, right? But it feels evil when, you look on your phone or you look at an email or you look at a text message, or whatever, a letter sometimes in the mail, the old fashioned way, snail mail, and you see pages long or paragraphs long. It's like, oh my God, why are we doing this, And to approach a very sensitive topic like that too can feel really, really, really evil. So I totally get that. Longevity Rituals, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to see you as well, Fairy Girl. I'm always glad to see the dab. And you, welcome. Glad to see you. Christopher Crabtree, hello. Welcome to the live chat and thank you so much. Thank you. I sincerely do not do this on purpose, okay? I don't. I really don't. I don't do the earrings on purpose. I'm just me. And boom, the earrings just pop up. Somebody was in the store with me the other day, somebody that was shopping with me, and they were like, your earrings are so cool. Do you go online and search them out? And I'm like, no, I really don't. So I thank you for that, Christopher. Sadie Smith, hello, welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's serious chat. I'm glad to see you. I hope it's going to be a helpful chat for you guys. Judith Barrett, hello. Glad to see you. Heather Mixon, glad to see you. I am glad to see you. I like to give you eye contact as much as I can. T Mac, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. I am searching for comments. Yeah. Judith Barrett says, wow, if popular, many must be suffering. Absolutely. They are. If you search the topic of evil using, I'm trying to think of one of the tools that I use. I don't use this tool, but some people do. TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy is like a research tool for creators, and we can go to TubeBuddy, open it up, type in a topic, and you can see how many people need to find a particular search term. And if you type in evil under TubeBuddy, it's 1.5 million people who have literally searched that term out on YouTube. So it's a very, very serious topic. The issue, though, is a lot of people either don't want to bring it up, Judith, or they don't want to mention the term evil because there's this socially internalized fear of appearing quote unquote crazy, sick, unstable, unreasonable, religious, hyperstitious, superstitious. Oh my God, superstitious. So for a lot of people, they don't want to mention it, but they will go to YouTube. 1.5 million will go to YouTube and say, you know what, I need to know about this. Heather Shaw or Shul, hello, welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Glad to have you. Says, I was born like the rest of my family, toxic, liar, evil, but only through God I've changed with him. He changed me, if be nothing without him. Yeah, I think you meant I'd be nothing without him. That's wonderful. That is wonderful. There are probably some people who are like, oh, God, a come to Jesus moment, but it's true. It is true, right? Sometimes that's all we need to redirect our focus and energy and our purpose. And we find purpose and morality there for sure. Sun and Sunflowers, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. I was trying to find a little bit more comments before I jump into the actual comment. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going through. A seat at the King's table with Tanisha. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Okay, there's tons of you on here tonight again. So I am going to pause the chat. I'm going to come back to you guys. Let's jump into some of the content, okay? So if we're talking about human evil, here's what psychology says are three components of human evil. One is that there often tends to be an emotional component. So anytime there's a research study being done on the topic of evil, there is three important components that are observed in human beings who have done some atrocious things. And we're not talking about just psychopaths. We're also talking about individuals who I see something I need over there. I'll get it in a second. We're also talking about individuals who have done some really cruel things in families, some really cruel things in relationships, who tend to operate off of an energy of manipulation, of triangulation, of relational chaos. So we're not just talking about people who do atrocities. We're also talking about people who do some really evil, wicked things, like miswire communication or miswire some things in a relationship or between people to cause chaos. That is really evil as well. Causing intentional misinformation and confusion, that can be considered evil as well. So anytime psychology has identified these people, three things tends to be central and center stage. One is there's an emotional component known as callousness. Callousness, that tends to be in there, which is really the inability to have any kind of emotional warmth. There's nothing there. So if you have a lack of emotional warmth in some capacity, you don't have to be a hugger, you don't have to be somebody who is touchy-feely or really sensitive at heart, but you can have a heart, right? That's sensitivity. Without a heart, you are callous. And callousness, if you break it down to its very basic form, is really the idea of not being able to relate to other human beings. We call that, we call it empathy, but we also call it theory of mind. Theory of mind. And it's an actual neurological term that identifies a part of the brain that is located in what we call the temporal lobes. The temporal lobes are on the left and the right side of the head. So think of your temples. The temporal lobes are there. And within the temporal lobes is a component of empathy. Okay. And that component of empathy is theory of mind. And that's the ability to say, if I were put in this particular situation or position or treated this particular way, how would I think, feel, and behave? And so it's the ability to really look outside of yourself and then personalize and have an emotional response to that. So psychology says there is the component of callousness. The other component is an interpersonal component, and that's the lying, the deceiving, the pathological lying. Let me be very specific, because I think lying can kind of come across for most people as, okay, we do lying sometimes. We tell white lies, things are not always told in a truthful manner. Okay. Pathological lying has a different definition, because pathological lying says I lie with or without a benefit. I lie even if it hurts somebody, even if it means somebody is going to be destroyed. I lie. I do it sometimes impulsively, and I also do it intentionally. I don't know why I do it, and sometimes there's no direct benefit, but I lie, and I lie all the time. And you may or may not be able to tell what's a lie and what's not a lie with me, you know? And so that's pathological lying. So in the interpersonal component of psychological evil, there's that lying, pathological lying, that deception, that manipulation, that taking information and crossing it up and spreading it and confusing it and misinforming other people. All of that is the interpersonal component of psychological evil. The last component of psychological evil that psychology has identified is behavioral. And that's really criminality. It's what's the level that you are willing. The question is, I'll put it this way, the question is, what is the level of intensity that you are willing to go to? What's the extent that you are willing to go to hurt another person? Are you going to kill them so that you can put them in your living room and have a human body there with you so you won't be lonely? That was Dennis Nilsson. Or are you going to kill, strategize, kill, dismember, and then believe that that dead person is going to live through your soul, and you're going to actually put that dismembered part of that person's body on the floor and sit there with it and eat popcorn and watch television? That was Jeffrey Dahmer. So what is the intensity and the extent to which your evil takes you? Right? And so that's the behavioral component that psychology has identified. If you get a mixture of callousness, pathological lying, deception, manipulation, triangulation, the list goes on, and then you get that behavioral component as well, the criminality, the intentional behavior in addition to everything else, then psychology says you are evil. Now, we have to look at the spiritual, the theological, the spiritual. Did I already say that the spiritual components of evil? And we have to ask ourselves, does this go a lot deeper than psychology is taking it? I think it does. I think it does. It's almost like some people are literally, and I don't want to alarm anybody by using this term, but bear with me here because I'm going to give you some psychology behind this. It almost feels like there are people who are literally possessed with evil. They change. They change. And it's like looking at somebody that you once knew, or looking at somebody that you thought you knew, and the question then becomes, who are you? Right? Let me grab something, guys. Bear with me. Hold on. I need to grab something over here that I need, I think. You would think that I would finally get at some point. I think this is what I need. Yeah. You would think I would get at some point in my YouTube career that I need to have things right here. I never catch on. Okay, so there's psychology's theory of evil, but let me tell you about the Stanford prison experiment before I go to the chat box and see what you guys are saying and answer some questions. For those of you who are not aware of Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment, I encourage you to go ahead and Google it, but I'm going to give you a snapshot of what it was. So it was a research study done with college students who became prisoners and guards. And this study was done in 1971, okay? Philip Zimbardo is a social psychologist. He wanted to know, what is it that takes a seemingly moral person from good to complete evil? What takes them from possibly being a moral human being with a conscience to a human being that doesn't have a conscience at all, that seems to change, that seems to kind of transform or morph into something completely different when they are pushed the right or the wrong way, I should say. So Philip Zimbardo wanted to know what this is. So he recruited 24 college students who he assigned positions. There were prison guards and then there were also prisoners. The whole scene was done, the whole research study was done in a prison. And this was supposed to be a civilized prison, okay? Keep that in mind. As the study went on, so as different components of the study was acted out, because the idea was, number one, how do we understand human behavior? What's the extent of human behavior? What is the extent of evil in human behavior? What is that point where a person can be pushed so far, or maybe be born in a certain way, that all they want to do is create evil and harm for other people? What gets them there? And so what Philip Zimbardo did is he brought together these college students. There were 70 that responded. He took 24 of them, put them in a prison-like environment, and said, let's act out these roles: prison guards and prisoners. Let's go from here. Let's run this place for $15 a day. I'm going to pay you to role play and act out what is going on in this prison. Okay, so how the daily activities go in this prison. What ended up happening, long story short, is the environment became harsh immediately and instantly. It became harsh, it became violent, it became alarmingly real. And these role players, because that's essentially what they were actually acting out near violent behaviors towards the prisoners in this Stanford prison experiment. And it's almost, for Philip Zimbardo, it was almost like the prisoners and the prison guards, who they were role playing college students, these individuals, actually, it almost felt like a possession of their mind, of their heart, of their soul, of their ability to reason what's okay and what's not okay. It was almost like they went from human to completely abnormal. They were no longer human. They had all the components of psychological evil. They had the emotional callousness. They had the interpersonal deception, the pathological lying. They were harsh. They really were acting as if they were police and as if they had authority. They were really cruel in some of the ways that they behaved and talked to the prisoners in quotation marks. And they also had, the prisoners began to behave in a criminal behavioral way, I should say. So that behavioral component that we just talked about, they became criminals instantly. And so it was kind of like a research experiment that went from, let's test and see how far this can go, to, oh my God, we need to stop this experiment because it's deadly. It's really dark and something is going on here. And so, Philip Zimbardo, he had multiple conclusions, but for our purposes, the conclusion for him was that humanity can become evil if pushed the wrong way. If they actually possess a certain role that they are engaging in, if they actually ingest or digest certain things, they can then turn from good to evil. Okay, I think I can accept that. However, I do believe that there is some element of being born evil. And so there's a lot of research studies. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit before I tell you what to look for. But there's some research studies where twins have been born and they have been tested neurologically. Their genetic codes have also been tested, and they have a high level of callousness that has been identified genetically. And twin studies tend to be kind of like the it all for researchers, because if something can happen once, fantastic, but if it can happen twice, that's even better. That confirms the belief for researchers. So twin studies are done to kind of really determine the foundation of things. So some research studies, especially in London, have been done to identify, is there a genetic component to callousness, to coldness, to evil? And some research studies in London, primarily King's College and Imperial College in London, say, yes, there is. Okay, let me go to the chat box, see what you guys are saying, answer some questions. I'm hot, guys. I don't know if it's this light or what, or is it this topic? Whew. Okay. Let me get to the chat box, take a minute. I'm going to come back, give you a little bit of research so you'll be able to say, these studies existed. Let me Google this and see what this is all about. And then I'm going to tell you what you may want to pay attention to or what you may have already noticed in your own family. So we will get to that. Okay. Liz, hello. Welcome to the live chat. Glad to have you tonight. Says so interesting. Right up my alley. Greetings from New York. Yeah, absolutely. Mine too. When I studied psychology so many years ago, I started off as a college student. The very first thing that I chose was forensic psychology because I wanted to understand the criminal mind. I wanted to understand the psychopath, the sociopath. And so not only did I study psychology and forensic science, but I also studied forensic psychology. I had gray hairs by my junior year, let me just tell you. But I did all of that because, it's interesting what psychology and even forensic psychology, which is the study of really crime. It's the study of the criminal mind. It's the study of criminal intent. It's the study of law, but from a psychological angle. And so, it's really interesting to look at the human being and ask, what made you that way? What is this? You certainly didn't learn this because some of our very evil psychopaths of all time, I think Dennis Nilsen is kind of like the UK's Jeffrey Dahmer, but Dennis Nilsen and Jeffrey Dahmer, they were, to me, they are the quote unquote notorious serial killers. These individuals, they didn't necessarily come from terrible families. So psychology is scratching their head like, what is this? What's going on here? We don't get this. And we're still trying to figure it out, let me say. Mrs. Ed says, would it be possible to agree that to an extent evil is a subjective term? Because what is evil in one culture can be perfectly unevil in another culture. Absolutely. And that's where psychology, sociology, and philosophy step in, because their idea is this, that psychology, I'm sorry, let me start over. From the fields of psychology, sociology, and what was the other one? Sociology, psychology, and sociology. Did I say that already? I don't know. Bear with me, guys. It's been a long day today, believe it or not. But from the fields of psychology and sociology, there's the idea that the term evil is a socially and culturally constructed concept. That if you're from a particular social class, or if you're of a particular social theory or time or generation, or if you're from a particular culture, then your idea of evil can shift and be very different. I come from a family where my concept of evil, if I take my psychological piece of who I am out of the equation and my profession, my idea of evil is theological, cultural, and personal. Because I have seen some very atrocious, and I hate to say this because I love kids, and that's what I run my practice on, treating kids, treating teens, treating families. But I have seen some really evil kids. And I don't mean evil in the sense that, spooky evil, the red devil on Halloween. I'm talking kids who look like there's no soul behind their eyes, kids who have engaged in murderous acts and there is really no real trigger, kids who have done some really harsh strategic things like rape, molest, the list goes on. And these kids I don't want to say they would be considered damaged, but they would be considered kids who are really hard to rehabilitate, and they do exist. They may be 1 to 5% of our population, according to research, but they exist. And I've seen them, and I've sat in counseling rooms with them, and I've been terrified myself. Years ago, when I was a brand new graduate student, I studied forensic psychology in a juvenile detention center and a juvenile based internship. And in those experiences, I was able to observe kids who had done some really criminal things, using a one-way mirror. And so the kids didn't know that I was behind there observing them, but the look in their eyes and the presence in the room and the feeling in the room and the disposition and the attitude of the child was very striking for me at the time. So does that exist? Yes. The other piece of this is cultural and religious for me. I grew up under a Christian, mentality. My grandfather is a pastor of 60 years, 30 years, something like that. My mom is into that. I come from spiritual roots. My cultures, African American, Native American, German culture tend to have specific ways that they believe in the concept of evil. And so you're right. Long story short, Mrs. Ed, that's my long-winded answer to your statement or your question. It is a cultural and social thing, but I also think it's a very personal thing as well. You can't know what you haven't experienced. And so if you haven't experienced the depths of what evil is, no matter what the definition is, if you haven't had an encounter with a situation that left you with goosebumps, with fear, with just your head spinning, then you can't necessarily understand it 100%. That's the way I like to look at that. That might be short-sighted, but that's the way I look at that, guys. Renzo, hello. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to see you. Says inherent self-worth versus inherent evil. I'm not sure. Is there a question in there? Bring that back to me because I think there's something in there that I could touch on. Phoenix, hello. Welcome to tonight's complicated live chat. Glad to have you. Says always so happy to see you. Thank you so much. Happy to see all of you and happy to see you as well. Phoenix says, my living situation is so frustrating and draining. Trying to talk to someone in deep denial is exhausting. Yes, it is. Thank you for your authenticity. You're welcome. Thank you for that. I so appreciate it. Yes, you're welcome. And thank you. Sometimes, again, and I may have said this at a time, maybe you weren't signed on, Phoenix. So forgive me if you've already heard me say this earlier, but sometimes there are just people who are well-meaning, but if you haven't had the encounters or the experiences, it's really hard for them to say, yeah, I understand evil. There's also the fear of looking quote unquote crazy or sick or unstable or superstitious or religious. And so people never really accept your conversation about evil, neither do they bring it up unless they feel that it's okay and safe, So it doesn't shock me that you feel kind of alone. Ooh, this is a tough screen name. Bat Elohim. Hopefully I said that correctly. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Says your insight on the dark psychology of toxic family dynamics has brought a lot of healing to my soul. That's so humbling. Thank you for that. And I'm so glad to hear that as well. So glad to hear that. Let me say, too, that the psychology of evil continues to be a perpetual study in this field. We are still studying what that actually means, how to define evil. Notice I haven't defined evil because there's a multiplicity of definitions of evil, and we don't have that 100% firm, concrete definition. So if I define evil, I'm going to be defining evil all night for the rest of the time of the live chat. So, I haven't defined it for that reason. But psychology says that there is absolutely no tangible cure, quote unquote, tangible cure for evil. We don't know how to necessarily define it. It's kind of like a ghost. We don't know how to define it. We don't know how to suspend it. We don't know how to treat it. We don't know how to heal it. We don't know. Right now, it's a theory for psychology. I'm looking at the comment section, guys. I'm sorry. I know I paused. I'm looking at the comments. Yes, Jessica J. Yes, 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 yes. You're welcome. I'm going to look at it. I promise. Catherine Gruber says, I'm not neglecting my kids, by the way. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Which is a continuation from her previous comment, by the way, guys. Israelite Beauty, hello, welcome. Thank you so much for that. That's so sweet. And welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to see you. Okay, Eartha Page. I'm looking for comments, guys. Eartha Page, hello and welcome. Glad to see you and glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Yeah, thank you for that. Makita, yeah, hello, welcome. Glad to have you tonight as a first, uh, here's how I'm trying to say this: a new person to the live chat, your first live. Glad to see you. Glad to have you. You know, it's been a long week when you can't get your words right. All right, guys, bear with me. Courtney Fraser, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Glad to see you. Rockin' Robin's Nest, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. Says, I come from a family toxic triangulation mom with dementia. I'm caring for a brother and wife. Both narcissist wife inserted herself into my mom's wallet and threatened me after assaulting me. Sounds like a very complex family dynamic. Let me say too that there are some individuals, I'm going to piggyback off of that there are some individuals who believe that evil is married into the family too sometimes. I have clients that come to session and they're like, "Oh my God, the devil just married my brother," or "Oh my God, the devil just literally married my mother yesterday or last week," or and that's a common thing that I see in psychology as well. They don't come in saying a narcissist, a psychopath, a sociopath, borderline personality. They come in saying the devil or evil, because that's the only way that they know how to define this atrocious behavior that is sometimes seen in the family. Believe it or not, there are some individuals who do marry into the family, and they don't marry into the family for good reasons. You guys know that. And when they finally get into the family, sometimes it feels like they instantly shift, they instantly change. They are not the same. It's like a switch, you know? That's common for sure. Ellie Wen, hello, welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. And you're welcome. You're welcome. Felicia Lewis, hello and welcome. Glad to have you, and thank you for that. That's like a barometer. It lets me know that I'm giving you guys what you need. Okay, let me pause here. Let's get back into the content because I need to try to wrap up around 7:45-ish, somewhere around in there. Okay, so we left off at the Stanford prison experiment. Let's go to a little bit of research, and then I'm going to give you some information on what you likely have seen in your own life and what you should keep an eye out for, okay? And this is the psychology of evil. The first research study I mentioned before we went to the chat box earlier was King's College in London and Imperial College. There was a research study, a twin study done where there was a question of, can callousness and can unemotional traits be inherited? And after so many twin studies to answer this question, it was found that callousness was something that could be inherited. It was something that could be influenced by biology and genes. The intensity and the level and the existence of callousness that is born within an individual can be genetic, can be biological, can be inherited, and it tends to be the number one predictor, of psychopathy. Anytime there's a research study being done on callousness or unemotional traits, callousness, Machiavellianism, cruelty, I'm trying to think of another term that we use in psychology to define evil. Yeah, I can't think of anything else other than that. The callousness, the unemotional traits, the Machiavellianism, the cruelty, we tend to define that as psychopathy. And callousness, the inherited form of callousness, is the number one sign or trait or risk factor for psychopathy. Meaning, in broken down common language, if you are born with a high heritability of callousness within your family, and sometimes it's heritable throughout generations. According to research, it can start with great grandma and continue for many generations within your family. There's no telling when it started, and there's no telling when it's going to stop either, and what's going to stop that genetic predisposition. But if there's a genetic predisposition of callousness, it's a risk factor for the development of psychopathy. Jeffrey Dahmer, Dennis Nelson, Timothy McVeigh. We can go down a whole list of, people who have been atrocious in how they communicate with society. These individuals would be considered um, considerations for research on callousness, because they've gone to the farthest level that you could go to engage in evil in society. And so, of course, again, research, and this is in London, has suggested that callousness is highly heritable. There's also a correlation between, and this is in the United States, there's a correlation between a high level of sadness and loneliness and violence and recklessness. So let me go over that one more time. There's a high correlation in the United States in psychology that we have found to be between a high intensity of loneliness, a high intensity of sadness, and violence and recklessness. Isn't that interesting? So when Jeffrey Dahmer and Dennis Nilsen stated that they strategized, murdered, and dismembered the bodies of their victims, Dennis Nilsen did not. He just killed them and sat them up in his home. Jeffrey Dahmer is the one who dismembered them. Both individuals claimed that the number one reason they did that, and I said this earlier, is loneliness. And so psychology in the US says there's actually a correlation between the degree of sadness and loneliness and the degree of violence and recklessness. There are also some generational studies that have been done. Generational trauma. Some people call it a generational curse, a family curse. There's been some studies done on generations where murder has happened in the ancestry, murder has happened in the uncle, murder has happened at the hands of a niece, and then it trickles down to the cousin, to the cousin's cousin, to the step parent, and then that trickles down. And so some research studies, I'll make sure to post them in the description box for you when this goes off. Some research studies have shown that generational curses, quotation marks, and intergenerational trauma can sometimes show that there's a long lineage in a family of murder, of death, of crime, of hate, of racism and prejudice, of intense anger that has led to murder. The list goes on. So these are the heritable or biological components. You conclude if being born evil is a possibility. I think it is. I feel like I've seen it. I feel like I have observed it. Now, there may be situations, and this may be a really small percentage of people, where I do believe some people can start out innocent and be placed in multiple situations where they are victimized and harmed and minimized and hurt. And over time, they develop this kind of disposition that can come across as evil. I don't know if it's a protective mechanism, if it's trauma, if it's a defense mechanism. I don't know what it is, but I have seen, and psychology has highlighted, that there are individuals who were born innocent, sweet, precious babies, the ones that you just want to kiss and hug all day. And then they turn 10, 11, 12, 13, and there's no soul behind their eyes. They will go to a far extent to hurt somebody else. They strategize and they critique and they try to figure out how to get over on people. You know as well as I do that there are criminals every single day who are literally studying how to get over on you, how to get over on the next store, how to get over on the next police officer, what to do with the next person that they're in a relationship with. This is the kind of evil that we're talking about tonight. So those are the research studies. Okay, guys, and I'm going to make sure again I post them so that you can click on them and say, oh, so this really does exist. I never like to give you my opinion, my clinical experience, and my insights without backing it up. So always know, if you go in the description box, you will see that information in the description box. Okay, so here's what psychology says, the psychology of evil. Here's some of the things that you have likely seen. And psychology has also highlighted this as a sign of human evil. Okay. One is episodic isolation and withdrawal. Any psychopath, criminal, dark empath, individual who has studied how to harm other people. Think of mass murders, right? Right? What do? Have you ever wondered how they get their weapons, when they get their weapons, how they map out where they're going to go in a building? They sit and process it. While you and I yesterday for the 4th of July may have been enjoying family, reading a book, watching the fireworks, enjoying whatever, there is literally a mass murderer. Yesterday is the number one day of mass murders in the United States, the 4th of July. That day in and of itself triggers mass murders. I'm sure you can Google and something will come up that happened yesterday. But mass murderers think, strategize, purchase the weapons, set up the weapons, and set out to do their evil and harm. And they know that they're going to serve time. They know that they're going to get caught. So what do they do at the end of all the evil they've done? They kill themselves. Or like Jeffrey Dahmer and Dennis Nelson, they go to prison for a very, very long time. And it's like they're unscathed. They don't really care. They almost have a nonchalance about them. So what? Yes, I murdered 20 people. So what? That's the disposition sometimes. So psychology says that these individuals, including mass murderers, they in our history, okay, all the way back dating before 1970s, they tend to have episodic isolation and withdrawal, loneliness and seclusion. That tends to be the number one thing. The other thing is lack of social and emotional feedback, whether that's within a family or in a relationship. Lack of social and emotional feedback. I love you. I care about you. Don't do this to your life. When are you ever going to stand up and do what you need to do because you have it in you? You're talented. You're intelligent. You're worthwhile. That's social and emotional feedback. These kind of individuals don't have that. So it almost feeds the callousness that they've been born with. Desire of complete, I'll put it that way. I was going to use another word, complete control over quote unquote victims. Those of us who were maybe taking a nap yesterday, thinking about going to work on Monday, they're somewhere calculating or online texting and talking about when they're going to kill the next person. Those kind of individuals in history tend to, and even in your families, I'm going to come to some things that are really relatable for you in a second here. But even in families, there's a desire for complete control over another human being. They want to put you in a position where you can't wiggle out of it. And sometimes that's why murder comes about, because they don't want you to be able to wiggle out of a position that they want you in. So there's a complete desire for control over another human being. Another form of this that may be more relatable to you guys is, I am going to tell you, I had a family like this years ago. I'm the husband. I am going to tell you, stop working your job, just be a stay-at-home mom, and I'll pay your way. I'll pay your way. And he knew, having had 3 divorces in the past, that there was a possibility this marriage could fail. So here's where he was evil. And here's where he wanted complete control over his victim, which is who was his wife. He knew that if he told her to stop working, they had 2 kids. He knew if he told her to stop working when she conceived, that would give her many, 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 many years. They were married for 25 years, many years for her to become kind of indebted to him and kind of his victim, if you will. And so when the marriage failed, what did he do? He said, you can't take me to court because you really don't have anything to take me to court on. You haven't held a steady job in 25 years. You've been a stay-at-home mom and I've made most of the money. What court is going to go against me? And so his evil was, I'm going to map out how to get you stuck in this situation so you can't get out, So that's one thing. They want complete control over your life. The other piece is that there's a high degree of self-destruction, Research suggests in psychology and even in forensic psychology and criminology that individuals who have done some really atrocious things in society, they've murdered, they've mass murdered, they've whatever, right? They've raped, they've done all kinds of things. These individuals also tend to be self-destructive. That tends to go hand in hand. They're destructive in the lives of other people, and then they're also self-destructive. The other piece of this is theory of mind. It's that capacity to say, how would I feel if I was in that position at that time, at that moment, They don't have that. So there's a lack of moral capacity, and there's a lack of theory of mind and empathy. Behavior may be outside normal and be kind of housed on the inside. And what I mean by this is externally they appear normal, but internally they are thinking and feeling all kind of things that they are suppressing. So, research in psychology suggests that these individuals, most likely evil individuals who are callous and cold and harmful, even in a toxic family dynamic, they tend to have this internal conflict. And so, externally, they seem okay, but internally, there's like explosions going on in their heart, in their mind, and in their soul. Some individuals are more or less evil at certain times in their life. That's another confusing thing, right? They may be a very devilish adolescent who has done some really atrocious things and become an adult and be an angel, maybe a saint, maybe a nun, and that's where psychology scratches its head. Like, how do we explain this? Think of the Stanford prison experiment. Philip Zimbardo made sure to recruit very healthy individuals to do this study, and they turned extraordinarily evil just by role playing. And they were only being paid $15 a day, but they thought that little bit of money was enough to be condescending, to be harsh, to be abusive. Even they were abusive as well. And lastly, for what you may notice and what you're likely to see even in your family, is evil may not reflect what we think it is. Evil may not reflect what we think it is. I think a lot of people, when they think of evil, they think of a red devil with horns and a pitchfork, or they think of Jeffrey Dahmer, or they think of Timothy McVeigh, or they think of Adam Lanza. Right? They don't ever think that that evil, devilish person could very well be my biological mother who has decided to sleep with my husband, or who has decided to abuse me and violate me on every side of my life. So evil may not reflect what we think it should at that time or ever. Okay, guys, let me go to the chat box. I really need to get out of here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but we're going to try. We're going to try. Amber Angel's Truth says, wow, this is just what I was thinking about before I got on YouTube. That's amazing. This was the time and the place for you to be here, I think. Okay. Annie Welker, hello. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to have you. Says, hi, Tamara. Hope you're having a wonderful holiday. Thank you so much. I hope you are as well. After this, I'm going to take a much needed break. That's for sure. Fairy Girl, I'm going to put your message online, up on the screen so everybody can see it. Yeah, Amber Angel's Truth says, let me go back to Fairy Girl for just a minute. I feel like I jump over everything you say. I don't want to do that. Be safe, radical acceptance, and realistic expectations. I very much like that. Very much like that. Amber Angel says she's familiar with the experiment and it's horrible. It is. I'm going to post it in the description box tonight so that you can go ahead and look at it. ARW, hello, welcome. Glad to see you tonight. Says evil corrupts the weak-minded. Yes, it does. Ladarius Dotson says, hey, Tam and fam. Hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. NK says, keep up the great work. Educate people on gang stalking. NK, welcome to the live chat. Glad to have you. I have a perspective on gang stalking, okay? And so I encourage you to check out my most recent live chat. That might be very helpful to you. All right. Whoops. I did not mean to hit that button. All right. We're going to keep going. I'm going to try my very best to leave before 7:50. Princess Ishikar Gad, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Yeah, much love to you too. Elizabeth Wiley, thank you for mentioning that. I'm going to put it on the screen. The Lord of the Flies. Yeah. Mrs. Ed said, in the field of social psychology, could the definition of evil be associated with the concept of mob mentality? I hope this question isn't too off topic. No, it isn't. I think it can be associated with mob mentality. Everybody kind of gets together and uses their power to aggress. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like the mind of morality gets erased. It gets erased. Sun and Sunflower says, I knew this was an evil person I was connected to. I literally feel the room shake. This person unhinged. I could feel the hatred coming from this person over something that could be worked through. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Sometimes that's a sign, right? Sometimes that's a sign the person's energy is off. We can't seem to make this work, whichever way we try to make this work. It almost feels absolutely impossible, and it should never feel impossible. James Folkers, hello, welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Says, I agree with that. Some people are born evil. Absolutely. Even as a psychotherapist, I do have to say that I believe my field is very short-sighted, extremely short-sighted when it comes to this topic. We're very behind. Yeah, thank you, Jessica J. I appreciate that. Okay. I'm just going through to make sure I haven't missed anyone. Thank you so much, Ellie Wynn. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's humbling. Okay. Carl Mullen, I see you on here. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure I haven't missed anyone. Hello, B. Glad to see you. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. I literally have to leave in literally 2 seconds. Jessica J, you're welcome. That's so kind of you. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm so happy to hear that. And I hope it's helpful to the rest of you as well. Just Kendra, hello. I saw you earlier and I meant to say hello. Welcome. Says the other thing is in the US, there is mentally that it is okay to step on other people to get ahead to some. It is not evil to hurt others if you benefit. Absolutely. We have that American sometimes mentality that if you step on other people, you're strong, you're a go-getter, you're successful, right? And it does. It kind of perpetuates what may already be on the inside genetically and biologically. And it can also create learned behavior, right? You learn just by that message we send to people that it's okay to be this way, and it is not. Guys, I so want to keep reading. I have to go. I'm going to be back tomorrow. We're going to talk about some other cool stuff tomorrow. Mindset, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Says Tamara, your perspective is enlightening. Thank you so much for that. I'm happy to hear that. Says, it's clear that these individuals are under demonic possession, which accounts for their heinous actions on a spiritual note. Absolutely. Agree. Anybody who can do some of the heinous, atrocious things that has been done, yeah, something's very, very wrong. That's why Philip Zimbardo says, I need to study this. I need to understand this. Now, he did really well up until a certain point, and then he went off onto a different road. And I'm like, okay, this is where I get off. This is my bus stop because I don't know if I agree with this. You guys have so many good comments. Cherry's Jubilee, hello. Welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. I cannot read that. I am going to have to say that this is the end just because of time. And I'm on crunch time because I have to go somewhere. So, guys, you are wonderful. Thank you so much for being a part of the live chat tonight. Ashley Gatchell, hello and welcome. I am going to come back tomorrow and continue this conversation. It's not going to be on being born evil. I'm going to talk about family toxicity, but from a very interesting dynamic and perspective. So stay tuned for that. I think you're going to like it. I'm going to continue the psychology of series because I think you guys are getting a ton out of it. So I hope you have a wonderful Friday. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night, guys.